Welcome to Gray Maybe, a podcast and social experiment based on this season's topic, abuse. My name is Jillian Schmitz. I'm a professional dancer, actor, teacher, author, artist, mother, and cat lover. Through my own personal journey of recovery, I've found that things aren't just black or white, or a simple yes or no. For me, in my recovery, there has been mostly gray area and a lot of maybes. In most of my stories, you can find the gray maybe. I will be sharing my own process through personal stories and interviews with others in an effort to destigmatize, bring awareness, and find recovery from many types of abuse. If you'd like to share your story, please email graymaybestories@gmail.com. graymaybestories@gmail.com. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're using to catch future episodes of Gray Maybe. A note before we begin. My stories and the stories of others on this podcast are told through the lens of our own experience. The revelation of our process is ours to tell. If you disagree with the views or stories on this podcast, know that we are not speaking on anything other than our own experiences and viewpoints. Take what you like and leave the rest. Nothing expressed or mentioned in this podcast is an endorsement or is meant to be taken as advice. It is strictly the sharing of our own experiences and our own recovery. Any feelings this podcast activates in the listener is for the listener to process and recover from. Any criticism you have based on these experiences and choices are yours, and they are not anyone else's burden to carry. Trigger warning: intimate partner violence, rape. Welcome back to Gray Maybe. In the first episode of this season, I shared what I would call my main abuse story, even though when I was experiencing it, I wouldn't have classified it as abuse. After telling that story, I started to reflect on other experiences I've had that maybe at the time I didn't categorize as abuse, but now looking back, they definitely were, or at least qualified as some gray area. What follows is a collection of short stories or situations that I wanted to share to add to the discussion on the topic of abuse. Did she touch you? I could see Britt peer through the crack in between the door hinges from the hallway, waiting outside the room as instructed by my mother. Britt was 12 and my babysitter. She lived in my neighborhood. She was one of my first friends growing up. She always dressed in the coolest designer clothes. Mature for her age, she knew so much about older girl stuff. She wrote in bubbly letters and dotted her I's with big hearts. Jill, you can tell me. Tell me the truth. Did she touch any of your privates? My mom pressed urgently. I sat on the bed and my stomach felt endlessly hollow. What was I supposed to say? I knew my mom wanted me to be honest, but I could also tell she didn't want to hear a yes. A paradox I now understand as an adult. You need the truth, but you don't want it. I knew my friend and babysitter Britt must have been scared of my mom, because I would have been scared of my mom. I was also scared of Britt's mom and most parents, actually. Waiting patiently in the hallway, I knew she was listening. I knew what bad touch meant. I was 7. My mom was fixated on my face. I had a hard time looking at her. I stared at the carpet. Finally, I said, no. Jill, tell me, she pressed. No, Mom. We were playing house. I was playing the baby. She was changing my diaper. That's not what I saw, my mom fired back. We were playing house, I repeated. Are you sure? She asked. Yes, we were just playing house. Nothing happened, I assured her. Silence. Britt, come in here, my mom ordered. Britt, I don't know what kind of game you guys are playing, but you're not playing it anymore. If you want to play, come downstairs or go outside. I don't want you playing this game again. Okay, Mrs. Schmitz, Britt said in a surprisingly calm, almost chipper and nonchalant tone. How did she do that? See? Told you she was cool. It occurred to me then that whatever we were doing must be wrong. I felt remorse and a deep need to conceal this game, along with this incident in complete secrecy. Obviously, this was something very horrible I was involved in. My mother's response was so intense it frightened me. I felt conflicted because at 7 years old, I had already begun to be extremely curious about human sexuality. I was enamored with the female body and couldn't wait to have boobs, wear a bra, fancy dresses and high heels. Everything symbolically feminine was interesting to me, and I was obsessed with it. I was also very eager to know how babies were made and what all that kissing and what the other girls I knew had called humping was about in the movies I saw. Britt always had all the answers. What she didn't know, she made up. And I filled in the blanks with my own theories, which were quite unscientific. For instance, water made boobs bigger, and you could get pregnant by kissing a boy. That day, Britt and I were playing like we usually did, which was usually house. Only our version wasn't me being a baby needing a change. I had lied to my mom. Britt and I were playing a romantic rendition of house. We would trade off on male and female roles and act out what we'd seen on movies and television. Only we didn't really know what we were doing, just kind of mimicking the humping we'd seen. It was exciting to act out these adult scenes, and often it was my idea to play this game. I'm not sure who started this game, but Britt wasn't the only one I'd played it with. There were other friends, some in the neighborhood, some not, and eventually this version of house became the game of choice. Did privates get touched? Yes. But it wasn't necessarily the aim. Was pleasure involved? Maybe. It was more exciting to me to just pretend to be a grown-up doing grown-up things. Britt was a bit older than me, 5 years at the most. And although she was 12, she acted like she was 25 in her essence and information. But was this sexual abuse? Had I been molested by an older kid? Maybe. And where did Britt learn about it all? Had she been molested? And the other girls in the neighborhood, who taught them? It's been 30-some years, and I'm no closer to an answer for myself. In the first episode of this season, I spoke about how after my abusive relationship with Dawn as a teenager, I made a promise to myself I would never get involved in another relationship like that. And I definitely didn't, to that magnitude. But bad habits are hard to break, especially when you've been primed your entire life. If you're a seasoned listener of the pod, you may recall my relationship with Brett in the first season, episode 1. For those who aren't familiar, that season focused on abortion. And although I mentioned some very unhealthy themes in that relationship, there was more to it. Brett made me feel excited, important, and divine in the beginning. He kept pointing out all the ways it seemed like the universe wanted us to be together, how everything seemed to be conspiring for us and that we were meant to be together. I wanted this idea, and I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to be in alignment with what my purposes were. I wanted the kind of love I'd read in books and seen in movies. Somewhere deep inside, though, I was constantly battling the feeling that I could only explain as a type of buyer's remorse when it came to Brett. But I was a junkie for newness and feeling cherished, and I wanted to buy the fantasy and a new life with Brett. Quickly, I spent almost all of my time on the west side at Brett's apartment. He confidently explained to me once together that our new life shouldn't include me working in clubs and doing burlesque. Now that I was his girlfriend, he more or less insisted I stop. He wrapped this demand in care and concern, telling me I was too good for these places. A pit of fear was accumulating in my gut. I wouldn't be able to fully support myself, and these were my dreams he was talking about. I told him as much, but he insinuated he would do his best to help me to ensure that I wouldn't have to go to such drastic measures to make money. With this new TV show job I had gotten as an assistant for and more constant work, I winced and somehow convinced myself I could quit all my other side hustles. Side note, this TV gig I had, the choreographer I worked for was also extremely abusive, explosive, raging, demeaning. Luckily, I was able to stop working for them, but it took me almost 4 years. Pretty early on, I realized that Brett and I weren't very well suited for each other. We fought often and we fought hard. I felt like a tiger that he was constantly trying to contain, train, and cage. Most of the fights seemed to be my fault. They mirrored fights I'd had with a former boyfriend, only these were worse. He had the same advantage as the former, being nearly 16 years older than me, but he was much more insecure. He had rules he was obsessed with, applying to me and my behavior, but these same rules didn't apply to him. In his judgment, he gave himself ultimate immunity. He questioned the motives of my male friends and demeaned me by insinuating that I needed them to make myself feel better. Again, at this point in my early 20s, I wasn't experienced enough to argue like he could or like I could now. I put up a good fight, but I lost all of the battles. I stayed with him, holding on to whatever idea of him and us that I'd had. We went to work for the TV show in Baton Rouge and spent all of our time off drinking and fighting. At one point, he was so angry with me, I could tell he wanted to hit me. I baited him. Do it. I wanted this holier-than-thou, spiritually spouting, prophetic wannabe, meditating, self-professed, evolved asshole to lay hands on me. I egged him on. He grabbed me by the shoulders, shook me hard, and pushed me into his hotel wall. I secretly noted how fucked up it was, that in this relationship and moment, to me, that action felt like a win. I still stayed with him. I traveled to Toronto for a job assisting a choreographer from a grad film I had worked on, and Brett and I fought the entire time, long distance. After Toronto, I met him on the East Coast to see his independent film compete in a film festival and meet some of his friends from home. I played the part of the happy, supportive girlfriend, even though we fought the whole night after the screening. The next day, we attended a barbecue with his friends, and I spent the entire time trying to relate with someone, anyone, over anything. I tried sitting back and listening, waiting for someone to include me. It never happened. I tried sharing about me and asking others about themselves. It all seemed to lead to dead ends. I drank more to ease the unusual social awkwardness I was experiencing. After quite a few drinks, right before we left, I was able to finally have a fun conversation with one of his male friends in the kitchen. Once Brett and I got in the rental car to leave, his demeanor completely changed. He chastised me, seething through gritted teeth for the way I was behaving. He said that I'd embarrassed him, that I was flirting with everyone and acting like a slut. I searched my memory for everything I'd said and done that day and evening. I couldn't find any moment or action he was referring to. Then he referenced the guy I had a brief, authentic conversation with in the kitchen before we left. Brett accused me of being all over him, and that his friends told him that they thought I was beneath him. He was driving erratically as he spewed the list of my relationship infractions. It had begun to rain hard. The bright shades of summer green leaves surrounded us. The rain on the passenger window blurred all the shades of green together while we whizzed through upstate New York. My eyes burned with shame and my face as wet as the outside of the windows. I still stayed with him. A few weeks later, he met me in Minnesota while I was visiting my family. He had made a big deal about meeting my family. I didn't feel like it was time, but everything with him seemed so rushed, pressured, and pushed. My parents were concerned with the promise ring I was wearing and questioned its true meaning. I hadn't told my parents how much older than me Brett was, or that he had impulsively proposed to me and I had said no. And he had talked me into seeing this proposal as a promise and the ring as a promise ring so that I would wear it and keep the option of marriage open. I wanted them to meet him first because I knew how bad it looked on paper. It made him uneasy that I hadn't told them, but I didn't think it should be an issue, although of course it was. Having him visit where I grew up felt uncomfortable. My parents tolerated him, but I could tell they were unimpressed. He could feel it, despite my coddling and constant attempts to neutralize the dysfunction. My family waited for him to leave before quietly voicing their concerns. He went back to LA for work, and we fought some more, long distance. He didn't like any of my friends in Minnesota. He inferred that if I really cared for him, I would, quote unquote, trim the fat of all of the male friends in my life. I pointed out the hypocrisy of him being allowed all of his female friends, most of which he'd previously been in actual relationships with. He twisted words, and he had perfectly crafted rebuttals under the guise of his care for me, and how hurtful my actions were. Being in my teenage room, on the phone, late at night, with a jealous, insecure boyfriend who was hurling insults and dictating who I talked with was a parallel I'd only see in hindsight. I'd almost forgotten the promise I'd made to myself in that very room 6 years prior. After all the traveling and the jobs, after all the fights, Brett and I regrouped in LA and tried to work through things, which for us meant more arguments. The TV show was over for the year, and I was done traveling. I was out of shape, out of work, and soon I would be out of money. I had a burlesque gig at a venue in Orange County. Brett accompanied me to the job, and I was excited for him to see the show. He had seen the show once before at the Highlands nightclub after we'd gotten back from working out of the country, and at the time he'd been very complimentary. On the way to the show in Orange County, though, he seemed like he was making a concerted effort to be normal. I couldn't put my finger on it, and I wrote off my suspicion as paranoia. After the job, in the car ride back to his place, he expressed his concern for the type of work I was doing. He tried to lead me into agreeing that the burlesque work was somehow beneath me and wrong, how he worried about me in this line of work and didn't think it was best for me personally and spiritually. I played dumb and didn't contest his concerns, but I knew where he was going with it. He was trying to get me to quit my dance career. There was no debate in my mind. I was never going to trade anyone or anything for it. The voice in my mind was screaming, "He's never going to be satisfied." I didn't say anything. I just turned up the radio volume, hoping to drown out that voice in my head. Late that summer, work was sparse. I didn't have many freelance gigs that were happening, and I began to panic. Brett wasn't working either, and all those inferences of him taking care of me wasn't a reality. When I brought it up, he made it seem like something I had made up in my head. Staying on the west side at his apartment didn't help. The lazy beach community made me feel disconnected to the hustle and endless energy of Hollywood I was used to. What felt relaxing to him made me feel antsy. The view of endless water from his apartment overwhelmed me, and it felt like it extinguished the flame of my spirit. The waves felt sinister, like they could take me out at any minute. I was having nightmares of tsunamis that I was always barely outrunning. Sometimes I got swept up in the dark, violent water. I was questioning everything about my career and the choices I'd made, and I felt an underlying sadness I couldn't identify. Following another argument with Brett over him accusing me of flirting at an outing with his temporary coworker and roommate, I had taken refuge at my own apartment. Brett didn't like my apartment for some reason. He would never say why. Although apart, we still continued to argue over Instant Messenger. I wrote, "I haven't gotten my period yet." He quickly called my bluff. "You really think you're pregnant?" Did I? Until that moment, I'd been entertaining denial and naivety. The more I really thought about it, the more the hidden thoughts I didn't know I had were bubbling up. "Yes, I do," I typed. He responded, "Well, if that's true, then we have to get real with our lives." I knew what that meant. Brett was always pressuring me for the next step. He'd said in an argument if I didn't want to marry him now, I never would want to marry him. His idea of getting real was making ultimate commitments. When he talked like this, it terrified me. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready for the things that he talked about the way he talked about them. It was never enough for him to just be where we were. Reading his instant message made my stomach turn. I'm going to stop the story here, as that story continues in the first season and first episode of Grey Maybe. Watch out for all those snakes in Hollywood. I remember an uncle telling me while standing on my parents' porch at my high school graduation party. As naive as I was at 18, I knew he didn't mean actual snakes, like the rattlers I'd heard people see a glimpse of in the hiking trails of Runyon Canyon. A lot of people warned me about moving to Los Angeles. Most of those people had never actually been there or had any experience in the entertainment business. "Watch out for snakes" was a common saying, followed by mentions of the infamous casting couch. Relating ill-intentioned individuals to snakes was an interesting theory. I hated snakes, but I knew not all snakes were harmful. Most snakes even showed themselves to be friend or foe simply by what they wore. Their colors and traits, information for all to see. A tell-all of their nature as a friend or a foe. Snakes are more afraid of you than you are of them. That's what most of the nature books said. In my experience, abusers were not like snakes at all. Abusers were less predictable and more like an animal you feel comfortable around, like a family pet, one you could be fond of and even love. An animal that over time would gain your trust, but always really has the potential to harm you, and when you least expect it. Once I had finished training and was out auditioning, I'd hear occasional tales of fake auditions, whispers of young hopefuls being taken advantage of. It was never the cliche people had warned me about. The few things I'd heard ended up being a project or audition posted as one thing through deception, then turning out to really be something else. Word usually got around, and the situation was reported before anything really bad could happen. I never experienced the stereotypical advance from a director or producer. The experiences I had were less categorical. much more ambiguous, much less expected. There was the young CAA agent that took notice of me in a show and contacted my agent under the guise of wanting to help me further my career, only to find out upon meeting him that he represented writers at CAA, not actors or dancers, and had said that he thought I was adorable and wanted to date me. I had never been called adorable before. I remember feeling disappointed when his true motive was revealed. Abusive? No. Unethical? Maybe. I wanted to be picked out from an ensemble so desperately. It was easy to get overlooked in LA. For every job I booked, there were easily 50 or more I'd gotten rejected from. I'd grown accustomed to getting passed over. Because I wanted to be seen for my talents and hard work, this ended up feeling just like another rejection. Around the same time, I had met a producer from some popular shows through auditioning. He always remembered my name and gave me great feedback. I never booked any roles on his shows, but eventually he called me about a personal project he was doing. It was a film about a female pop group trying to gain stardom while overcoming the obstacles of the industry's seedier side. He had invited me to his house to discuss more about it. It felt weird going to his personal residence, and as I walked up his driveway, I couldn't exclude the feeling that it felt wrong. I walked into his makeshift garage studio and saw a barrage of equipment for editing and filming. He casually greeted me and, in between tasks on his computer, disjointedly explained the project. Nothing about this meeting was odd or off. It seemed strictly business. After his pitch, he asked about my interest of being involved, and I happily accepted. On the way out, walking past his wife's Suburban in the driveway and stepping over his kids' toys on the front lawn, I felt foolish. This wasn't some dangerous pervert. This was a family man. I chastised myself that I overreacted in my head and expected the worst. When filming started, I joined the cast and crew on some location scouting and was invited to some of the shoots. I never saw a script, and I was unsure of what my character was or my actual role, position. I was too inexperienced and afraid to ask questions. I was just happy to feel wanted. I would show up when asked and watch them shoot, wondering quietly when or if I'd be involved eventually. One of the scenes I witnessed was of a lead performing a lap dance on one of the other producers who was apparently playing a part in the movie. I remember the actress afterward feeling really uncomfortable and talking to the other actresses and questioning the legitimacy of the project. The next shoot day, they had rented out a club in the valley and had a lot of background artists for the scene. The leads were on stage doing a performance. Like before, I sat back and watched. Eventually, I was given a scene, still no script, because they said they wanted us to improvise the dialogue. My scene happened to be a kissing scene with another one of the female leads. I didn't have a problem with this, but it was never discussed previously, and I felt like if I said no, I would disappoint the producer and get hassled for it. I didn't have a moral issue with the same-sex kissing scene, and it wasn't my first time kissing a girl. I just didn't feel comfortable not being given the chance to consider it ahead of time. I did the scene because I felt pressure to, whether it was external pressure or my own internal. For months after the project, I felt ashamed I'd taken part in it. The whole thing, in hindsight, just didn't seem legitimate. I was silently praying it would never come to fruition, and I never did hear another thing about it. Years later, I've still never heard anything about it. It's a relief, but also makes me uncomfortable that a bunch of producers have footage that now I believe was just an excuse to act out their own sick fantasies. The movie was supposed to be about young women attaining their dreams in the entertainment industry and the sordid paths that they had to endure. Unfortunately, it seems like the movie became more of a disreputable documentary, with its creators conducting the very abuse they try and tell a cautionary tale of. Again, abusive, maybe. Unethical, definitely. A couple years later, as my dance career was really picking up, I was doing a favor for a friend by dancing in his piece in a showcase-type show called Carnival. It was a brief featured solo, and I was happy to be considered. I'd worked a few jobs with him, and he was very well known and successful in the dance industry. He had also made the coveted transition to lead actor in a few big blockbuster films. We got along well, and he had a unique sense of humor. He developed a reputation for being overly confident and a bit of an asshole, as well as a womanizer. I'd never dated him, much to his disappointment, as he'd remind me often. While getting ready for the tech rehearsal in the basement of the Key Club, I was having him approve costume pieces and shoes when he started saying extremely sexually suggestive things. This was not unusual for his character. and like usual, I shut him down repeatedly with my normal sass. He kept going. It was getting more intense, so I cut any flirt in my response because he clearly wasn't taking the hint. As I organized my things, folding each piece of clothing and putting it back in my bag, he walked up quickly behind me and pushed my back down, forcing my chest and face into the couch. I thought he was kidding, and I tried to get up and make a quick joke, but he held me down. He pulled his penis out of his pants and quickly masturbated onto my lower back. It happened fast, and with seconds, I was in shock. He then promptly put his penis back in his pants and got some paper towels. He seemed embarrassed. I just stood there, marked. I don't remember what I said, or if I said anything at all. He made some awkward conversation like nothing had happened, and I think I responded in a way that almost made it okay for him. I felt like I needed to help him feel less embarrassed, even though I was completely humiliated. He quickly left the room and started his rehearsal. I was so embarrassed by this incident, I wanted more than anything to forget it. I mechanically picked some of my wardrobe options that had been knocked onto the floor and put them back on the couch. The humiliation was thick. He had marked me. I wouldn't give it to him, so he conquered me and took it anyway. I had chosen not to be a part of his collection, another woman in his harem, but he enslaved me nonetheless. I categorized this for a long time in my head as consensual. I just kept dismissing it. I must have encouraged him. This must be my fault. I obviously must have led him on. I even did a couple of projects and performances for him in the years to follow. I still struggle with being able to link who I thought he was to what he did to me. I now know, unequivocally, that I didn't want it. I didn't like it, and I didn't ask for it. I was sexually assaulted by someone who was supposed to be my friend and peer. Right around this same time, I had booked an acting role in a real independent film. After it was released, one of the female producers approached me about doing her a favor. She mentioned a possible burlesque dance job for a guy she knew. This was not an unusual request. I'd done many private parties, weddings, birthdays, gags, and bachelor parties, even a retirement party. She didn't mention details about it over the phone, but asked if I would accompany her to a big luncheon for very important movie distributors. She was asking a personal favor, and for some reason, I felt indebted to her. We met at a ritzy hotel on Avenue of the Stars, and as I valeted my car, I saw her waiting for me out front. She was a stunning 40-something with long red hair, porcelain skin, and sea green blue eyes. It was obvious she'd been an actress and model before she became a producer. She had a soft voice and seemed really nervous. She explained to me that the man that we were having lunch with was a very powerful distributor, and that his decision to distribute would make or break the success of the independent movie we had done. We walked into the 5-star hotel restaurant and sat at the table adorned with a heavily starched tablecloth and white linen napkins. She briefed me by whispering, "Whatever I say, just go along with it." I nodded as a balding, short, and round older man approached. She immediately got up and hugged him, giving him a kiss on his red bulbous cheek. He had an accent, but I couldn't tell where from. She introduced me. I shook his hand professionally. The waiter came, and following her lead, I only ordered a drink. She nervously pitched the independent movie to him for distribution, which seemed odd because she never seemed nervous any other time. Giorgio didn't seem interested. In fact, the only thing that old man seemed interested in was her. She went into let's make a deal mode, but he kept insinuating something to her. I couldn't hear all of their conversation, even though I was fairly close. I wasn't catching on. She finally raised her feminine voice a little louder. "Giorgio, you know I can't do that. I'm married now. I can't do that. I told you that, remember?" She looked at me, gesturing. "How about Jillian? You love dancers. Jillian could do a sexy dance routine for you." Wait, what? My mind clicked all the pieces together like a jigsaw puzzle. This was the dance job she had for me? Whoring me out to this pervert? Fuck. I promised her I'd go along with whatever she said. Was she joking? He looked at me, but was disinterested and moved his focus back onto her. She started to negotiate to me about me, what else I'd be willing to do. Not knowing how much worse this was going to get, I remained steadfast on burlesque dance only, no nudity, which I never fully agreed upon in the first place, but I didn't feel like I had a choice. She tried to push my boundary of how naked I would get for him. He kept bringing his desires back to her. She was steadfast in her fidelity, and after about a half hour of this push and pull and both sides deadlocked, She gave her final plea and begged Giorgio as he signed the bill for our drinks and started to get up. He reluctantly agreed to distribute the movie with no strings attached. Once we were back out front of the hotel, she fawned over me, praising me endlessly, and beamed about how helpful I was. She was energized and overcome with excitement on his agreement to distribute the film. She even tried to make a joke about whoring ourselves out. To reassure her, because again, I felt like I needed to make her feel better, I went along with it. Once I got in my car, I dropped the veneer. I tried to brush it off and be thankful nothing real came of the whole situation, but I couldn't. The whole thing just felt off. I wanted to believe that what had just happened was no big deal, but my insides were twisted up. I didn't know what part of it bothered me the most. The part where she thought of me as someone to do her dirty work, or that maybe what they say was true about having to work yourself up the ladder. I didn't know a lot of other female producers. Maybe that was the only way to get ahead. Maybe it was how objectified I felt in that moment, or that a fellow woman would pimp me out. I couldn't metabolize it. I didn't tell anyone. I was embarrassed that I'd been associated with any of it, and that I didn't speak up or ask enough questions before meeting her. I cried in my car the whole drive home. She called me that night, again praising me. I made light of it. I was too regretful to be any other way, and she seemed too powerful at the time for me to be honest with her. Abuse? Maybe. Unethical? Yeah, probably. The finale of these memories I'm sharing is one that feels so difficult to disclose. I spent a great deal of time debating about including it or not. The purpose of this podcast initially was to tell my story, and in telling them, inspire others to do the same. And through that, I've realized I needed to free myself from all of my secrets and shame, expose all the things I've never told anyone in an effort to free the wild beasts caged in my head, release them back into the wild and outside of me where they belong. Deep breath. I had been asked by a good friend who I'd known since I first moved to Los Angeles to help him on an episode he was directing on a hit TV show. He was always charismatic and flirty, but respectful as he was newly married. He had always been a voice of reason and a wealth of knowledge in the industry. On set, things started out great. He introduced me to people and gave me small tasks to accomplish to help him and production out. I felt important and elated I got to work on this show, as it had just won numerous awards. I was taking notes for him when he read them over and began to make fun of me for not spelling a word properly. I shook it off and reminded him that I indeed did spell the word right because the origin of the word was French, and I had spelled it in French. Something behind the teasing stung, though. It felt personal. He seemed unusually edgy that day, and I wasn't used to it. I went to visit craft service to get a snack and asked if he wanted anything. He said no, and made a joke about me leaving him all alone because I didn't like him. I laughed it off, but it seemed like he kind of meant it. I returned to his trailer, which was located next to all of the production trailers, and he gave me more tasks to do, and we talked for a little while. Then he started complimenting me in an uncomfortable way. He had always been complimentary to me, but it always just seemed nice. This time it seemed more intense. There was a charge behind it. I tried to be coy and change the subject. I told him I needed to use the restroom and left the trailer. I took my time, hoping that when I returned, he would have cooled down and the energy would have shifted. In the trailer, he picked up where he left off. Only this time, he started saying that I just didn't really like him, that now that he's married, he can't have any fun, that I wasn't attracted to him. He was trying to make me feel bad, and it was working. I knew I didn't need to feel bad for him, but I did. He was more than a friend to me. All the years I'd known him, he had seemed more like almost a type of mentor and teacher than a friend. He was successful, he was smart, and he was directing hit TV shows, and he'd always given me such great advice. He persisted. "You don't really like me." I assured him I did. "I'm not attractive to you," he repeated. I tried to assure him, of course he was an attractive man. "Prove it," he demanded. "Kiss me." I gave him a polite peck on the cheek, hoping it would shut him up and shut this whole thing down. I was hoping that at any moment someone would knock on the door and need him on set. He persisted. Was this the price I had to pay to have gotten this job, I wondered? Was this the unspoken debt I owed for the prestige and privilege? "Kiss me like you mean it." "That was only a peck," he said. I kissed him a little longer, but like you kiss a friend on the mouth after great news. There, I thought, that should do it. He unzipped his pants and pulled out his penis. Now kiss him. He begged, please. I don't need to finish this story because you already know how it ends. Like so many survivors in these types of situations, I did what I needed to do to get out of the situation, to live through it, get to the other side of it, to the after it. At the end of the day, when the show wrapped, I got in my car and felt free. I exhaled, utterly exhausted. My eyes felt heavy, like they were sliding down the sides of my face. I pulled out of the parking lot and onto Melrose Avenue and became infuriated. Every single microabuse I had experienced from men in my life and career, I unleashed. I raged in my car and at stoplights until my face was bright red and wet from tears streaming down my face. I slammed my hands on the steering wheel and let out guttural noises I didn't know I could produce. I choke sobbed and through wails poured out all of the abuse. I was so sick of this happening. I was so sick of feeling like my debt for existing and having a seat at the table was to tolerate this shit. Why did it have to be like this? I screamed until my voice was hoarse. I assured myself this would never happen to me again, ever. I'm forever grateful and thankful for the introduction and awareness of the Me Too and Time's Up movements and how they have contributed to trying to eradicate abuse in the entertainment industry. I have continued to work on myself through 12-step programs and therapy to help me create boundaries and love for myself because I need these things to help my predisposition of abusive relationships and situations. It's never my fault what happens to me or that I seem to be a target for abuse, but it is my job to heal from it. And now it also seems like it is my job to share about it. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you were able to find something relatable in today's episode. If you'd like to show your support for this podcast, consider donating on Spotify or rate, share, comment, and subscribe. As I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, this is also a social experiment to see if in telling my stories, I can embolden listeners to share their stories. If you'd like to share a story on this topic, anonymous or otherwise, on the podcast, please email greymaybestories@gmail.com. greymaybestories@gmail.com. Thank you to everyone who helped make this Grey Maybe podcast happen. Producer and editor Roderick Barge. Cover photo by Jose Perez. Music licensed by Pixabay. Special counsel Jada Ellingham and Roderick Barge. Special shout out to supporters Patty Olgan and Jeremy McCullen. Until next time, bye for now.